Kirk Cousins may have played his final snap with the Minnesota Vikings. Kirk Cousins tore his Achilles, ending his season and maybe his time in Minnesota. Football fans, we are fully in the midst of the NFL season now. Obviously, I'm still holding on to some hope that my team can make the postseason, and why not double down and bet on them too? This video is sponsored by DraftKings Sportsbook, an official partner of the NFL. Right now, they have a deal that you are not going to want to miss. All customers can get a no-sweat bet on any same-game parlay or same-game parlay X. So download the DraftKings app now and use our promo code JDPROD. And if you're a new customer, DraftKings has your back. If you bet just $5, you can get $200 back in bonus bets instantly. If you're already signed up like me, you can get a no-sweat bet on any same-game parlay or same-game parlay X if your bet doesn't hit. Max wagering limits apply. With the same game parlays, you can combine multiple bets for an even bigger payout. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. New customers use our promo code JDPROD. Bet just $5 on any wager and get $200 back in bonus bets. That's promo code JDPROD only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Thanks again to DraftKings for sponsoring today's video. Let's get right back to it. Pretty much as soon as it happened in week 8, you knew it was the Achilles. It really did look a lot like that Aaron Rodgers tear. The replay started circulating on Twitter, and you just knew it was the Achilles. You saw it, and it was the end of his season. I will say there's a viral clip going around of him getting on the cart and leaving, and he's still just clapping for his team, and that's just who Kirk Cousins is. I don't know how you can't love him, and it absolutely sucks that he is now out for the season. It looked like it was going to be Achilles, but obviously we weren't 100% sure. They had an MRI, and the Vikings did confirm on Monday that it is in fact a torn Achilles, and that is just an absolutely brutal blow, not just to Kirk Cousins, but to the Minnesota Vikings. Minnesota had a lot of success last year, obviously got to the playoffs and lost to the Giants, couldn't get any wins, but then this year it started off a bit rocky, and they fought their way back to 500, and I'm telling you right now that now without Kirk Cousins, it might get ugly really fast. I think one of the worst parts is that Kirk was playing some amazing football this season. It honestly has been one of his best starts to a year. He had already thrown for 2,331 yards, 18 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions. Coming into week 8, he was leading the league in touchdowns and was second in passing yards. And remember that a lot of that was with Justin Jefferson missing time. That's how good Kirk Cousins has been this season. And now this really does complicate things for his future. Now, like I said, he may never play another snap with the Vikings. Personally, I hope he actually does, but I think just being realistic, chances are he doesn't return to Minnesota. His contract expires after the season. Kirk Cousins' time with the Vikings has been good statistically, but ultimately just been disappointing for the most part. He signed there in 2018 after he was with Washington, and honestly, I loved him in Washington. I'm a big Commanders fan, and when he was there, he was drafted the same year as RG3, had to wait his turn, and really was just kind of drafted to be the backup to your new franchise star quarterback. And ultimately, he got his chance, ended up being good, became the good, reliable starter, and truly is the last reliable starter that Washington has had. And truly, he's just one of the best dudes. And wherever he goes, I will root for him. I'm really glad he did get that one playoff victory in Minnesota, but I just wish he had had more success. He didn't get any in Washington. He only got one in Minnesota if he never comes back. He's got a bad rap as a guy that can't win in the big moments, and primetime Kirk really isn't a thing. He's been very good in a lot of primetime games. The reality is his team just hasn't won, and that's the metric that we use to break down quarterbacks. I just think for most of his career, he's been incredibly underrated. Now, I don't think he's a top 5 quarterback, but I think he's been top 10 most seasons, and he's he's just been overlooked. Now, the reality is the Vikings aren't just going to magically find a better quarterback. You can't go find another Kirk Cousins off of the street. And it could be Minnesota where he ends up next season, could sign a new contract, but either way, Kirk Cousins is not going to have a hard time finding a new home. I bet that Kirk Cousins is going to be in really high demand, but you can't really blame the Vikings for wanting to go younger and get a guy with a higher ceiling. And, might as well start taking some stabs at it, and that's why they drafted Jaren Hall in the 5th round. He's the guy that came in once Cousins got hurt against the Packers, and he's probably going to start in week 9. It hasn't been confirmed yet, but he is the one that came in, and he should theoretically. They did just trade for Joshua Dobbs, who I'll talk about in a minute, but Dobbs just got there. I'm willing to bet they go with Jaren Hall, and then if he isn't good enough, they can go with Dobbs from there. Hall played at BYU for 5 seasons. Originally, he was stuck behind Zach Wilson, and then he got a shot, and he was actually pretty good. He obviously had a stud wide receiver in Puka Nacua. His last season in Provo, he ended up with 3,100 yards, 31 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions. Definitely an impressive season. He's a really athletic dude, but he is a bit older, and he is undersized. I don't necessarily view him as a true future franchise quarterback. Jaren Hall probably should have sat for a while before getting thrown out onto the field in the NFL, but now we're probably going to see him a lot earlier. Part of that is because Nick Mullins is on IR with a back injury. Theoretically, he would be the Vikings' backup if it wasn't for his injury. And because of that, Minnesota did cover their bases at the deadline, trading for Josh Dobbs. If Jaren Hall underperforms, or he just simply is not ready, now the Vikings at least have a backup plan. Minnesota ended up only having to give up a 6th rounder to get Dobbs and got a conditional 7th back. And man, Joshua Dobbs has had a pretty crazy year. He was traded by the Browns to the Cardinals and started their first 8 games of the season, and he was fine. It was nothing special, nothing terrible. He had 1,500 yards, 8 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions. Perfectly serviceable. Now Kyler Murray is going to be back soon, and the Cardinals want to go ahead and get a look at rookie Clayton Tune. I think Dobbs is just a capable starter, and he's at least going to give the Vikings a chance to win some games. But really, losing Kirk Cousins completely derails the Vikings season. It's just hard to see this team able to make the postseason now, especially with the Lions already running away with the NFC North. Now I'm just really interested to see what Kirk Cousins' future looks like. And who knows, Kevin O'Connell might want to re-sign him. It's going to be really hard to find someone better. And I think a lot of that comes down to whether or not the Vikings want to immediately be good, if they're going to try to use this current roster, or if they're going to have a quick little rebuild, retool. And some of that is going to have to rely on Justin Jefferson, who they're still waiting to sign to that big extension. If the Vikings do want to move on from Kirk, their best case scenario for the rest of the season is probably just to absolute suck. I don't think they're going to be good enough to get one of those top quarterbacks, but they can probably luck into a tier 2 quarterback like a Shitter Sanders or a Michael Penix. But obviously we're going to have to wait and see. Caleb Williams and Drake May, unless they trade up for them, I just cannot see a possibility that they end up in Minnesota. As for Kirk Cousins, he's going to be somewhere next season. Where? I have no clue, and I can't wait to figure out. If I personally had to take my shot, I think I'd actually go with the 49ers if they decide that Brock Purdy just isn't working out. Obviously, he had some success early. They've lost their last 3. It's going to be interesting to see how everything goes with Brock Purdy. But Cousins has his issues, obviously. But Kyle Shanahan could literally make him an MVP. I mean, look at how good Brock Purdy was playing in that Kyle Shanahan offense. Kirk Cousins is way better. He could be really, really good. They already have a previous relationship from when they were in Washington. I think it'd be a perfect match, but obviously we'll have to wait and see. But whatever happens, at the end of the day, I just feel so bad for Kirk Cousins. I think he's just one of the best dudes, and no matter what happens, no matter where he goes next season, I'll be rooting for him.